I have a creepy encounter that I had when I was home alone one evening, back when I was in my early 20s. This was a while back when Halo 2 had just come out, if that tells you anything. And I was playing through the campaign for my second time, taking out the Covenant forces like a true Spartan. I lived in a duplex by myself, one that was situated in a cul-de-sac, so we didn't get much in ways of foot traffic. I liked it. I kind of miss living there because of how quiet it was. Things ended up going sour with the rental companies, so I don't live there anymore, but it's not really relevant to the story. Anyways, I was just playing my game when I heard a knock on the front door. Slightly annoyed by the interruption, I hit pause and went to open the door, assuming it was my connected neighbor coming over to ask me something, or maybe a salesperson. I opened the door and come face to face with this scruffy, older-looking guy. His unkempt beard and worn-out clothing gave me a bit of an uneasy feeling. I'd never seen this guy before, and he had no reason to be on my front porch. This guy looked at me with a slight smirk and said, "Hey, are you Dan?" Now, I am Dan, but I couldn't fathom how this stranger could know my name. I confirmed that I am indeed Dan, and he hit me with a strange request. "Awesome. Hey, I need a ride to work." I was taken aback, because I didn't recognize him from literally anywhere, and I've never had some kind of arrangement with anyone to take them to work. Confused, I asked him how he knew me, and why he thought I was going to drive him to work. The guy then says, "I was talking to Shannon earlier. She said you would give me a lift." Strike two. I don't know anyone named Shannon. Thinking about it, I don't think I've literally ever met anybody named Shannon in all my years. I knew it wasn't my neighbor. They were an older couple named Keith and Mary. So, who Shannon was a complete mystery to me. I politely tried to explain that there must be some kind of misunderstanding, and that I was sorry, but I wasn't going to be able to help him. Instead of understanding my position, he got all riled up and stared at me with this intense and angry gaze. He wouldn't back down. He kept repeating that I needed to drive him to work, that I had no choice. Feeling a bit creeped out, and not wanting to engage further, I apologized again and retreated back inside, locking the door as soon as I shut it. From the safety of my home, I watched as he stood there and threw his arms up flustered, and then threw himself down on my patio chair, lighting a cigarette and just staring off at the street. It was like he was fixated on this idea that I would give in, open the door and say, "Oh, you got me. Come on, let's get you to work, buddy." Time crawled by and he was still out there, just stubbornly sitting in my patio chair and watching the front sidewalk. Every once in a while, he would look back at the door and shake his head angrily, like he was in disbelief that I wouldn't help him. 3 hours went by and he was not budging. It got to the point that I was half wondering if I should call the police, but he wasn't doing anything illegal, I guess, other than trespassing. He was just being incredibly strange. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he gets up and just walks away without saying a word. I watched him walk down the sidewalk and eventually just disappear into the sunset. I was still bewildered about who he was, why he thought I knew him, and who this mysterious Shannon might be. To this day, I have no idea what the encounter was all about. Maybe it was just some bizarre misunderstanding. Or perhaps it was something else. Something more sinister. Maybe this was some kind of trap, and when I didn't fall for it, he didn't know what to do. Whatever the case, It was one of those eerie moments that makes you question what the hell is going on, and let me tell you, I had no idea what was going on. I have a strange but scary situation that happened to me back whenever I was 13. My parents both worked, and I didn't have an older sibling or any nearby family, so I was left home alone. A lot. I know that's not the best parenting, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they did the best with what they had. If they could have afforded someone to watch me, I know that they would have done so. I wasn't a bad kid. I would just stay home and watch TV or play my PlayStation. And normally there weren't any issues. On this day, the sun was setting, lighting up the living room through the side window, and making me feel like I was about to doze off while I ate my pizza rolls and watched some late afternoon cartoons. In the middle of me starting to close my eyes, I was jolted awake by a loud pop. I shot up from the couch, throwing my plate of pizza rolls on the floor. The sound was like a balloon bursting or a firecracker, but 100 times louder. Looking around the room, I couldn't see anything amiss. The window was intact. The outlet hadn't burst into flames. Nothing like that. I glanced out the window to see if someone was out there, but I didn't see anybody. I started picking up my pizza rolls and blowing them off to get the carpet bits off of them. I was 13, so I was still going to eat them. As I was picking them up, listening to the sound of the TV and waiting to see if anything else happened, I jumped again at the sound of the doorbell ringing. I froze, but then it rang again, and I figured that I should do something. I shouted, "Who is it?" as I walked over to the door and reached for the knob. I heard a voice say something on the other side, but I couldn't tell what he said. All I could tell was that he was out of breath. I pulled the door open slightly, thinking that if I didn't open it all the way, whoever it was couldn't get to me. I asked him who he was and what it was that he wanted. The man on the other side of the door was a large and quite burly guy, sweating heavily, and his face was a bright red. His voice was weak, almost like he was trying to not let anybody hear him. He asked, "Are your parents home, kid?" I should have lied, but in my nervousness I blurted out, "Oh, no, they're not home. They will be soon, though." I still don't know why I told this guy that, but I did. But then the man spoke again after taking a deep breath. Alright. Could you call 911 for me, son? I've been shot." Wait, what? My eyes widened in shock. He moved his hand slightly, and sure enough, I saw the red stain on his shirt. He wasn't kidding. This wasn't some kind of joke or anything. He had been shot. Without another word, I dashed back into the house, fumbled with the phone, and dialed 911. The operator picked up and asked me where the emergency was, and I never knew how stressful calling 911 actually was. As I explained the situation, I could hear the disbelief in the operator's voice, but she assured me that help was on the way. The man staggered over to our porch and dropped down, sitting heavily against the side of the house. I think those sirens were the most comforting sound that I have ever heard. Paramedics rushed to the man, applying pressure to his wound and loading him onto a stretcher, and they were gone as quickly as they showed up. Obviously, the cops showed up too, and my parents came home in the middle of the chaos, returning home with a sense of terror, I'm sure. The cops were kind, but their questions were a bit pointed. I repeated my story again and again. The pop, the man, the blood. Eventually, my parents took over, and I was left to sit on the couch, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving me feeling hollow and a bit shaky. A few days later, we got the news that the man had survived, thanks in part to my call. I felt pretty good about myself when the officer told me that I had probably saved that man's life. That pride was a bit short-lived, though. I was actually somewhat terrified to stay home alone, and my parents weren't willing to leave me there. I'm pretty sure that we all had a bit of PTSD, me from the whole situation, and them from coming home to a bunch of cops stationed outside their house. I was honestly okay with them not being willing to let me stay home anymore. To be completely honest, I feel like this event made me grow up a bit quicker than I should have. I didn't really feel like a hero, though they told me I had done a good thing. I felt scared and vulnerable, and like my home wasn't the safe haven I'd once thought it was. It's one thing to see someone get shot in a movie, it's another thing to see a gunshot wound within a couple feet of your face. I had some nightmares about the whole thing for a while, and I had this weird fear that I was going to wake up to one of my parents being shot, something that obviously never happened, but still weighed heavy on my mind. I know that all sounds a bit dramatic, but it's true. I was a bit too young to be thinking about my mortality, but if someone could shoot someone like that in my neighborhood, what was to stop them from doing it again? Would I get shot while walking to my friend's house? Being confronted with those kinds of things that early in your teens, it kind of changes you. And while I'm now an adult and have never been faced with anything like that since, seeing that man hold his stomach like that is a visual that I will never forget. Back when I was around 16, my parents wanted to get out of the house and take a vacation for their 20th anniversary. They toyed with the idea of taking me with them, but I mentioned that, being 16, I could handle myself for a couple of days, and that they should just go take their vacation and enjoy their time together. They were a bit hesitant at first, but I pushed them into it. I didn't have any plans on doing anything crazy. I just wanted some time to myself more than anything. So, I was happy when they said that they would let me stay home. The house was in a good neighborhood, one that had pretty much zero crime or issues. So, there wasn't anything that I was worried about at all. It was a rarity to have some time alone, so I was taking this opportunity to work on my culinary skills. I decided that I wanted spaghetti, and yes, it was a challenge for 16-year-old me. I was straining the pasta and stirring the sauce, and was happy that I had somehow managed to not burn everything, when there was a very loud knock on the door. I was a bit confused. I wasn't expecting anybody. My parents hadn't told me anyone was coming over. I thought that it might have been a friend of mine from school, but the knocking was very heavy and loud, so it wasn't likely. I thought that it might have been maybe a delivery person or something like that, so I figured I could just ignore it and get back to my culinary masterpiece. I had just added the pasta back to the pot and poured the sauce over it when I heard the loud banging on the door again. When I glanced over at the door, I saw what looked like someone walking past the front window, and saw what looked like police lights out on the street. This completely changed my thought process. The loud banging was probably an officer at my door, and I probably shouldn't ignore them. My mind went to why they were there, and for some reason, I immediately thought about the possibility of my parents having gotten into an accident. I turned off the stove and quickly stepped over to the door. What happened next happened very quickly, and I want to say that it was probably only a couple of seconds, but it felt like it was moving in slow motion. I unlocked the door and went to open it, half expecting the officer to tell me that my parents were dead. But as soon as I had opened the door, I was met with the business end of an automatic rifle and numerous men screaming at me to put my hands up, to get down on the ground, and to not move. My mind was rushing, incredibly confused on how I was supposed to put my hands up and get on the ground without moving. But I ended up just putting my hands up and getting on my knees as quickly as I could, thinking I was about to be shot. I had no idea what was going on, why they were pointing guns at me, why they were even there, and I'm pretty sure that I started bawling immediately. One of the officers grabbed my hands and pulled them behind my back, and then pulled me away from the door, while the other officers, the ones with the bigger guns, pushed into the house and started shouting. I was so confused, but the officer pulled me over to his car and put me in his back seat, and then started to explain things to me. He asked me for my name, how old I was, what was going on, etc. I told him all I could, that I was 16, that I was making dinner, and that I didn't know why they were there. He then asked me who else was in the house, and I told him no one. I told him that my parents were out of town for the weekend and that I was just home making spaghetti. And at this point, I know for a fact that I was bawling. He tried to calm me down, and after the SWAT team had cleared the house, they came out and one of them decided to talk to me some more. He told me that they had gotten a call saying that there were two men that had broken into the house and that they were holding the family in the house hostage, and that these men had already killed the children. He was very thorough with the details about what they were told. I told him that none of that had happened, that it was just me, and that I was making dinner for myself. This was such a terrifying and confusing situation, and they had me call my parents so that they could talk to them. They confirmed the information that I had given them, and then they explained what had happened. Come to find out, for some reason completely unknown to myself and my parents, I was swatted. Someone had called in a SWAT on my house, telling them about these murderous guys that never existed, and what their overall goal was is anyone's guess. The whole situation is one that I will never forget. I will never get rid of the visuals of having multiple guns pointed at me, get the sound of their screaming at me out of my head. If any of those officers had had an itchy trigger finger, gotten the wrong idea about me or my actions, I honestly could have died. I am grateful that nothing went wrong, that they handled it correctly, but it doesn't make it any less terrifying. I have a story from a while back, one time when I was home alone. I live in a somewhat old house with my girlfriend, and she was at her mom's house helping take care of her dad. Not really relevant, but he'd been in an accident, and she wanted to get out there to see them. The house that we lived in was an older house, a single-story house with a basement that was built a long time ago. It had its old house quirks: creaking floorboards, drafts that played tricks with the doors, so forth and so on. It was a chilly November evening, a real teeth chatterer, the kind where you could see your breath fog up in the air, even when you were inside. Since it was just me in the house was mostly silent, save for the occasional groan of the timber and the pattering of freezing rain smacking against the window. Most times, that kind of night would have been perfect for curling up under a blanket with my Kindle and a cup of cocoa. And that's actually what I planned. I figured it would be a nice evening of some self-care until all this went down. I had just finished my chapter in my book when the power just completely shut off. I don't mean like flicker, I mean a full-on plunging into an inky and disorienting darkness. None of the lights were on, the TV shut off, and even the glow of the streetlights had disappeared. The only thing I could see was the faint shimmering of the ice and the snow in the moonlight. I sat there, frozen for a moment, just trying to really figure out what I should do. I remember fumbling around for my phone, but when I hit the button, I saw that I was at 3%, and it wouldn't turn the flashlight on because the battery was too low. This was a pretty bad situation to be in. No power, no heat, and a phone that would last for probably 5 minutes if I had to use it. I wasn't really sure what I should do. I figured that I should go ahead and check the circuit breaker in the basement, just to be sure that it wasn't a power surge or something. I went over to the kitchen, and I rifled around to find a flashlight. When I finally found one, I opened the door and went downstairs into the cold concrete pit that we called a basement. I trotted around the boxes and things that we had down there to get over to the circuit breaker. I opened it, and before I flipped the main breaker, I paused. I heard what sounded like the floorboards creaking, like they were being walked on. I listened intently, thinking that it was just the house shifting, but being unwilling to just let it go. But after a couple of seconds, I heard a very specific click that happens when you walk from the living room into the kitchen. There's a specific floorboard that makes a popping sound if you step on it, and only when you step on it. That sound doesn't happen as the house shifts. It only happens when the board actually has weight on it. So, at this point, I knew for certain that there was someone walking on the floor. But this made no sense. It was about 10 o'clock at night, it was snowing out, and why would someone be out in this storm? And why or how would they have broken into my house? I slowly made my way back to the staircase to go upstairs, half expecting to see someone standing up there. I just stood there and listened for a moment, as I heard a very distinct sound of someone stepping slowly, opening the drawers and cabinets, and shutting them and then moving on. I was even more confused on what to do. Now, I'm not the biggest guy, and I was in my boxers and a bathrobe, with nothing more than a dollar store flashlight to defend myself. Should I go up and confront this intruder? Should I stay down here and hide and just let them do what they want to do? I decided to do the latter, figuring that if I went up there and they had a weapon, they would be able to take me down like I was nothing. I stood there, staring up into the dark stairwell, watching a beam of light shift around the room through the slightly cracked door. The entire time, I could feel my heart pounding, hoping that whoever this was would not open the basement door and see me standing there. After a few very long seconds of waiting, the lights popped back on. The motor of the fridge started up and the heater system kicked back on, the silence being completely broken by the hum of various electronics. I heard those soft steps change very quickly to fast and heavy ones, stepping across the kitchen into the living room and back toward the front door. I took this opportunity to run up the stairs, and if they weren't in the kitchen anymore, I could grab a knife to defend myself. When I got to the top, I grabbed the knife from the block and turned to the living room, half expecting to have to fight off some random person. But there was no one there. I looked down, and I saw the trail of wet, snowy footprints. They headed towards the door that was now sitting wide open, the snow blowing into the entryway. So, at least then I knew that this was a person, and I wasn't losing my mind. From what I could tell, this person had entered and only gone into the kitchen. I don't think they had enough time to really go anywhere else, and the lights clicking back on probably spooked them. I looked out into the front yard and down the street, and I didn't see anyone, so I assumed that whoever it was ran off to the side through the yards. In the end, I have no idea who this was or what they wanted, nor do I know how they got in. I swear that I locked the door, but I guess it's possible that I had forgotten to do so. The other thought that rocked my brain was that if I had taken literally another minute or two to go downstairs, or just stayed on the couch, we would have come face to face, and I would have been a sitting duck if he had a gun or a knife. I'm actually kind of glad that I decided to go downstairs, as that decision may have actually saved my life. So, that, my friends, was a collection of some Home Alone stories. Some stories that occur while the original poster, I suppose, is still the right word, even if they're submitted, was at home by themselves. Being home alone is always such a thing, right? Not necessarily a scary thing, but definitely can be. It's kind of terrifying, even in places where you feel safe, to be sitting there and just absorbing the silence. Now, I don't think I've been home alone for a very long time, unless Patience has gone to the store at some point in time, and, then I've been home alone or whatever, but even here, she works upstairs, I work in the basement, so sometimes I just sit down here and it's just really quiet. It's almost unsettling. It really is. Yeah. Kind of crazy how the place, like I said, that you should be feeling safe can sometimes warp into this twisted idea of scariness. Once again, I had a profound thought that just died as it exited my mouth, so anyways, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you enjoyed what you heard. And comments. If you would like to do so, feel free to go down below the video to where the comment section is. Leave a comment with whatever you want to leave. Let me know how you're doing, how it's going, what your plans are for the rest of the week. My plans are to put out more videos, so there's that. Yeah, anyways, you can also do super chats, or no, not super chats, super thanks. Really wish YouTube would just use one word for their stuff. Super thanks, where you can send a donation to the channel. Always appreciated, never expected. You can also join Patreon membership, where you get early access to content like this and other stuff depending on how you sign up and what you sign up for, and all that good stuff. Yeah. Anyways, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful week so far. I hope that I do see you again very soon. But until then, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important. You're the best you that you can be. Never forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, much love, and sleep well.